Canes fans, welcome into another edition of the CanesInSight podcast. I am your host, Peter Ariz. Have a very special episode tonight. Brian Monroe, former Canes punter, and a lot of you know him from the pregame shows on 560 WQAM. He's one of the hosts as well as an analyst. He will be breaking down a little bit of Miami's win over Miami, Ohio, but really diving into that A&M matchup this week. Got into a little bit of the ACC. Obviously, last night was a huge upset with Duke beating Clemson. Florida State had a big win on Sunday night. But again, interview coming up after this. Brian Monroe, we get into the A&M game. If you have not already heard it, D Money and I went live on Saturday morning after the Canes had that big season opening win against Miami of Ohio. So you can check out our thoughts. It's on the YouTube page, also in audio form, wherever you get your podcasts. And again, the Thursday Night Live is going to be the place to be this week. D Money will be joining me, so we'll be getting into the A&M game with him there. And then Lance Roffer's Hurricane Vision on the website on CanesInSight always does great breakdowns, a lot of film and analytics and stats related stuff. So he'll bring something different to the table for us on the live this Thursday at 8 p.m. So I'm very excited about that. And then, of course, the Titanic. This is an amazing deal, guys. For all the games this year, dollar wings in orders of 5, 10, and 20, which if you're a wing eater like I am, you know that's an amazing deal these days. And that's going to be from 2 p.m. through the end of the game, with happy hour also starting at 4 o'clock. And on top of the $1 wings, you get $1 jumbo shrimps as well. So this is going to be all season long. I know a lot of you will be at Hard Rock, but if you can't make it out there for whatever reason, if you don't have tickets, and you're in town, the Titanic is the spot to be for all Canes games this season. The official CanesInSight watch parties there. Going to see a ton of you, I know, at the away games out there. But that deal, man, it's going to be tough to beat that best game time deal in Miami. But coming up now, Brian Monroe, former Canes punter, joining the show. All right, Canes fans, excited for this guest coming up here on the CanesInSight podcast. Brian Monroe, former Canes punter. Of course, you can catch him every weekend on the 560 WQAM pregame show, as he's one of the hosts as well as an analyst. And, you know, great punter in his time at Miami. Does a great job, obviously, on these pregame shows. And listen, if you're a high roller out there looking for a private jet charter, if you're serious about it, hit him up in his DMs. Yeah, I know we got some high rollers that listen to this show, but excited for Brian to be on today. B, appreciate you joining me today. Nice to get a solid win right out the gate, right, and not really have to stress about much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. And listen, we talked about on the pregame show, what are we looking for in a game like this? Normally in the past, we're looking for like, oh, this is an inferior team. We're just looking for us to dominate, not make mistakes. But obviously, the last couple of years, we couldn't say that all the time when it came to an inferior team. So I kind of wanted to see, establish the line of scrimmage, something I don't think we've done a great job in the last couple of years, winning the short yardage, whether it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, 3rd and 2. Big thing to me on defense was tackling. We were one of the worst tackling teams in the country last year. And I want to see the additions of like Kiko Maligoa in the middle of the field. And also, obviously we have Cam Kitchens and, being the All-American, could James step up and be a little bit different as far as like lowering his shoulder and get bouncing off some stuff and, wrapping up. Will we see him inside the box more? Or are we waiting for Texas A&M? How's with the outside corners that we, added with Davis and, Brown on the outside? How would they look? So I thought, for what it was, they did what they had to do. Obviously there was a little, some penalties you like to clean up with the freshman right tackle and Maui Go, but that's, it's normal. It's your very first game in college and stuff like that. But I think they did an excellent job as far as setting the line of scrimmage, running the ball. The offense was very vanilla. We know it wasn't sexy, and that's what you want. You don't want to show much. You want to just be able to say, listen, let's get out of here with a balanced offense, establish the run, and then we can really open up the playbook with this week with Texas A&M.
Yeah, I heard you on the pregame show saying, look, I want to see them running to the football, wrapping up. And it's crazy, those things that we've taken for granted now over the past 10 years, right? And really over the last couple of years in particular, but it was just good to see that fundamental side of the game cleaned up. But listen, the fundamentals will only go so far this week against A&M, right? Because you're going to be going up against a different monster in the trenches, but they're definitely more equipped for it this year compared to last year. Obviously, looking ahead to this game, last year they go on the road in College Station. You want to see if they can keep it close, which they did, but there were not many moments of optimism to come from that game in terms of the offensive side of the football and some of the things that transpired there. Looking at this matchup this week, how much better suited is this roster than last year? Because you're there in practice every day. You're there, you see it up close. The general public just saw it last week, but talk about how this roster is better suited for this matchup this year.
So they're bigger, right? You got the size. You hear about the SEC is always bigger than any conference out there, and it's true. They normally get some of the big boys up front, and I think Coach Cristobal's done a great job flipping the roster when it comes to size, especially in rooms that I felt like we were really small last year. The linebacker room, the offensive line room, even the running backs. Like you look at a kid like Mark Fletcher that he looks like some of our running backs that were seniors the last couple of years. So just getting that size and to compete with that, I think is going to be a huge difference when it comes to Texas A&M. Because look, you guys know recruiting. They have 4 5 stars on the defensive line all over the place. So you're going to need those bigger bodies up front. You get the Matt Lee in there from UCF, who's one of the smartest guys out there, one of the biggest leaders. You get Cohen from Alabama, which is a big boy. The only thing that kind of worries me in the offensive line is you got 2 younger guys on the right side, right? So obviously they got big bodies. Inez Cooper is ginormous, and so is Maui Goa. But how will they go? How will they react to going against the 4 and 5 star guys in this environment? Because it is one of their first big games against those type of players. So it'll be interesting to see with that. But this roster is equipped more because of the size. You have a middle linebacker in there that's now 6'3", 230 something that can go and hold up against these big offensive linemen from Texas A&M and the running backs. You look at Brown that came in from UCF. He's 6'2". A little bit of he's, I guess you would say he's Tyreek Stevenson's as far as tall wise, but I feel like he's a little bit faster than Tyreek than what we saw the last couple of years from Stevenson and stuff like that. So I think just the body type, you're going to be able to compete a little bit more with the Texas A&M of the world. But now it comes down to, will you win your one-on-one matchups, right? Because if you watch them against New Mexico State, it's not like they did anything sexy, right? Kind of like us. They had an inferior program. They just said, you know what? Our guys are better than yours. I'm going to put them one-on-one, and I'm going to toss it up, And, again, defensive line, they put their offensive lineman one-on-one. Are you going to win it? Are you going to get to their quarterback? Or is he going to get to sit back there nice and comfortable and have all the time in the world and actually be able to get through their route tree? And that's when it's going to be it could be a long day for us if we can't get after him. He just gets comfortable.
You talk about the size. To me, a linebacker, the speed too, man. Those guys can run, which has been an issue at that spot the last 3-4 years. Look, they've had a couple guys drafted, but at the end of the day, in the modern game, you need guys who can run and get sideline to sideline.
Yeah, and you look at, again, you brought in, Cloyd from Louisville at the last minute, and everyone's like, what are we bringing this guy? And this is just a body. It's not going to work. Well, by the way, he had a couple tackles for loss in the first game. He's been with the linebackers coach for the last couple of years, so we trust him. We understand that. And he's an older guy, so he's seen ball, and that's what you want. You want guys to be able to recognize, play recognition, and get after it, And, again, Kiko, I can't speak more highly of him. Saw him in the spring, and I said, well, there's our middle linebacker. They're like, you don't think it's going to be? I'm like, no, that's your middle linebacker. That's what your linebacker should look like. And if you look at what Cristobal's done in the recruiting process for the linebackers, I think the smallest guy is 6'2", 225, and all can run. So you see the future, what that room looks like, the competition in that room, getting it better. And I think that was one of the biggest, transfer portal acquisitions that he did with Kiko, because you solidify a defense, right? You got a field general in the back with Cam. Now you got somebody in the second level that is going to be able to tell the defensive line where to shift, look at the younger guys, help out over here, do this. I think that just solidifies it. And I think with Texas A&M, you lose A-Chain in the backfield last year, who was their, speed guy, 4'2". Obviously, he had that, I think it was a screen pass or just a an out to the right that he killed us on, scored a touchdown with that. I feel like they have a little bit more bigger backs there now. And I know they have a young man in the backfield from Miami Central. I believe I haven't gone through the roster yet. So they're going to have some guys that are going to want, get some revenge on the hometown team, whether we recruited them or we didn't. They didn't choose us. But I think now you're just suited in that linebacker room to help the run out. And then also be, like you mentioned, speed-wise to get out and helping the slot or helping the tight end, and solidify the tackle when, you got a pitch and all of a sudden my corner's out there and he holds him up. Well, I need that linebacker to get over there and clean him back up.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Wesley Basanth now can come along at his pace now that you have a Cloyd in there. And look, I got a call from a scout the other day who's been at practice, said Cloyd is big and he can run. And like you said, they wouldn't have taken him if Coach D. Nick at linebacker he worked with him, right? So first of all, from a character standpoint, you knew he was going to be able to fit into the locker room, right? And it's just some guys just need a change of scenery at the end of the day when it comes to this transfer portal stuff. So look, an old foe in Jimbo Fisher, who always seems to have Miami's number, right? I don't know if you saw the clip that's already out on social media, but Jimbo named about 25 guys on this team. He seems locked in. He seems ready. You know that Coach Cristobal and his staff have been waiting all offseason for this game. But Jimbo looks like he's motivated this year.
Well, Jimbo's always going to be motivated, right? That's he's been a top coach for a while. He had a couple of years where he wasn't considered. Oh, his teams aren't good or his offensive. Like he's an offensive guy that knows that, right? And then you bring in who we brought in, Petrino as well. So they got the offense humming. They're going to have a good game plan. He's always going to have something towards Miami because he played, he coached at Florida State. And he's always going to have a little bit of a hatred, in his heart. And he's recruited a ton of guys on this because you don't have a top 10 recruiting class last year if you don't have some of the big boys in the class. And, the Francis of the world, the Sampsons of the world, Mark Fletchers of the world. These are guys that he's going, head on head with, Cristobal to get them as well. So, and, they were 5-7 last year too. They beat us. But they didn't have a great year. So people are, talking a lot about him as well as being on the hot seat as well as the contract he has going. I don't know if they could afford to let him go for as much money they would have to give him, but he gets talked a lot. And then, you came over from Florida State being one of the highest paid coaches because you thought that we could take Texas A&M and be what Alabama is right now. And I feel like, LSU's passed them on the West. I mean, look at Ole Miss looks like they passed them, so he hears it from everybody in SEC. So this is the next step to say that, we're here, we're a team. We went on the road. We beat a Miami that's a lot more talented than they were last year. And it's just another notch for them.
A couple more things before I let you go here, Brian. And this is the question that I'm most excited to hear your response about because all off season long, I got the fans asking me, what are you hearing about the new punter? I can't analyze that position. There's mostly, a lot of these scouts don't know how to really look at the position, right? But you played it at a very high level here at Miami. I don't know this Australian punter thing, man. It looks like it could be a very, very nice pipeline as Dylan Joyce makes his debut last week. I mean, what have you seen in practice from him? And obviously he came out on Friday and did a good job as well.
So the Aussies have taken over, right? This Aussie rules kick is it's the next wave, which it does a great job. And, I never did it, but you could just watch it and see it. And you're just like, well, damn, I don't know how you do it like that, but hey, it works. And it's just, if you look at college football, there's Aussie rules, punters everywhere. I think we got a little spoiled because our first Aussie rules guy was Lou. And Lou came in and not only was Lou a badass and a dude, but he was a great punter. You leave being, should have been an All-American. I don't think he got the first team All-American because he got robbed. I think his junior year was. But he made the 53 for the Saints, so that tells you how talented he was as a guy. So he's got big shoes to fill because everybody loved Lou. When you're a punter and The Rock shots you out for making the 53, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Listen, he got into his first game. He did what he had to do. I talked to some of the players about him, and they're saying he's getting better and better and stuff like that. Actively in practice, I've only seen him done it maybe once or twice, and he looked good. But it always it's always determined on what you do in the biggest games, right? Because like at Miami, Ohio, it should be an easy game for you, right? Like this is just a warm-up game. This is just to get used to being in a stadium for the very first time. But now you're talking about most likely will be close to sold out for the Hard Rock. It'll be rocking at 3:30 for this type of game. What if you're backed up inside your end zone? And that's kind of when you're really going to see what type of punter he is and what kind of mental strength he has going on for himself. But from everything I've heard and everything I've seen, I think he's going to be fine. He just, again, you're following up a guy that was a beast for this team and was a fan favorite. So it's never easy.
Can you explain a little bit the differences between the Aussie style punting and I guess the traditional style, which you did? Because look, you have to have some bit of athleticism. It looks like to pull it off, which you could have done. You were taking snaps at receiver at Miami.
So the kind of roster we had back then.
Yeah. So I mean, listen, not far off from what happened last year, right?
Oh yeah, you're right about that. Listen, it's kind of like when you go back to the whole straight on kicker to soccer style kicker, when that whole changed the whole thing, right? One is completely straight on. Same thing with the traditional punting, right? We're straight on. We're talking about ball drop straight. You're trying to come straight through your leg and it's just directional, right? So we walk a line and say, okay, we're going to put it in this corner. We're going to put it in that corner. So it kind of started to change a couple of years after I left as far as traditional protection as well, where we went from that protection where it just looked like it bowed up here to now they do the spread protection. Then it went from, okay, cool, we went spread to now these Aussies started bringing in this side kick mostly. And it's more of like a punting a ball from like a goalkeeper where you're like coming out to the side and you're just punting it away. And again, I couldn't say I could go out there back and do it like they do it because it's different how they hit the ball than how we're taught and trained to hit the ball. But I mean, it works. I mean, and the thing that works about it is if you see from your traditional punters, we normally try to get that, turnover and that spin, where theirs is like when it's the Aussie checkup that they do when we used to figuring it out as far as like inside the 10, when you want the ball to check up. They're now doing it to the side and just getting it 45, great hang time, no return. So it works out perfect. And, I don't know the exact name of Aussie Kick Camp or whatever it is down there. They're producing beasts. So whatever they're doing, let them keep doing it.
Definitely. And let's see, man, like you said, these big games, things get a little tense, his hands may be a little sweaty,
But that's what every position, right? We're going to see exactly what's going to happen now because you got some of the younger guys in that game last week that like, hey, yeah, we did this. We didn't have any drops. And it was great to see that, that next step. But now, we always say like you got Green Tree practice All-Americans and then you got guys that, under the bright lights. It's, they get tense and the hands get sweaty, like you mentioned, and, drop balls, missed assignments because you see a bigger dude, more athletic dude, and now you're thinking too much instead of playing ball. So I think it goes with everybody. But I think you have the right guys in the room with like Coach Cristobal and some of the other coaches that will have these guys prepared and ready for everything because I know they've been breaking down film all summer. You ain't got 25, 30 analysts in the room not breaking down room this whole time. So I know they'll be prepared, and I think that the way that this roster has changed over the year, I think you're going to see a different game. And I'm eager to see what kind of game plan both the coordinators bring out because, you watch A&M and how big out, the receivers are on the outside, how shifty Stewart is. They're good in the slot as well. How do you prepare for that? Are you going to leave him one-on-one coverage with no safety help and get after it on blitzes? Are you going to leave Cam out there to help on both sides? I don't know. And then also how you're going to see Guidry on the other side, Dawson on the other side. How do you go ahead and attack their defense when they have a beast of defensive line? And I think it's number 40, the linebacker that's been flying all over. So it'll be interesting to see how their game plans, and I'm eager to see that part.
A lot of unknowns on both sides because you have Bobby Petrino as A&M's new coordinator, and Guidry said, look, it's Petrino, but there's still a lot of Jimbo in what they're doing. So, and then obviously Miami with two new coordinators. So that tactical battle is going to be a great one to follow this weekend. Two quick things, non-Cane related that I wanted to get to real quick, that non-Cane related, but both very Cane related at the same time. Florida State, LSU, man, FSU, I know LSU didn't look very sharp, right? But just like last year in the opener, but Florida State looked like they have some dudes, man.
Hey, you know what's funny? I was reading like social media and hearing people talk in the last couple of days about, Florida State don't look that good. Blah, blah. I'm like, did we watch the same game? Like, do you not see the guys they have? Like, I watched the Clemson game last night, and you could come off thinking that with Clemson, like, okay, maybe they're not, gelling well with the new offensive coordinator. They didn't look good. Florida State got dudes, okay? And by the way, Jaden Daniels is the reason why they looked better LSU and made Florida State look worse, because he got out of situations because he could scramble. We ain't got a guy that's moving like that back there. So they got guys that got off on the ball, but he was able to escape. So I saw that. I'm like, this is going to be – they got issues. And then, by the way, they got two freaks of receivers now. You got the 6'7", you got this kid Coleman they came after, and I know everyone was talking about him in the transfer portal, and we wanted him as well. Well, they got him, and you can see why. And then you get the kid, South Carolina, the Bell kid, the tight end. I mean,
yeah, Jaheim Bell. Yeah.
And you got freaking Travis back there, where he's a 6-year senior. He's seen a ton of ball. I mean, I think, from watching all the games this weekend, for me right now, you can't say they're not a top 4 contender. I mean,
them in Colorado, man, them too.
I mean, the Colorado thing, I'm not one game against a bad TCU team. I think, there's always overhyped teams every single year in the preseason, right? You put them where they are because of what they did last year. They easily could have been 8-4 last year with a couple missed field goals and this and that. Then you also talk about you lost your quarterback, you lost your top 2 receivers, you lost your running back. You lost your offensive coordinator, and you already have bad defense. So how much did Colorado give up? 500-something yards? Yeah. So that means that Sanders has got to throw for 500 yards every single game. Travis has got to stay healthy. Edwards has got to stay healthy. It's a long season. There's the overreaction for week 1 is always the funny thing, and I never like to overreact on any team, good or bad, because it's only one game. Anybody can run the table. Anybody can make adjustments. And for them, let me see what happens when you play USC and it's going to be touchdown for touchdown. When you play the Oregons of the world out there. I don't know if they play Washington or not, but teams that are going to be legit contenders, right? I think they did a lot better than most people thought. But to me, it's TCU. I get it. They're ranked, but what if they're a 7-win team at the end of the year? What if they're a 6-win team? Is it that big of a win now? Right. We've been ranked before in the preseason and end up being a 7-win team. Were we really good? Come on.
I'll tell you what, though, those press conferences and the post-game interviews will be must-watch.
I mean, listen, he does
every time.
Dion does a great job marketing. There's nothing you can say about that, but that's been him since he's been a player. He's been the most talkative guy on the field, in the room, anywhere you go. You're going to know exactly where he is. So that's why he does a great job recruiting, because, one, you're considered the best defensive back to ever play the game. And then also, you're a great marketer. Can't hate him for that. I'm glad he's in Colorado instead of somewhere closer in the South, because recruiting would be a little bit more difficult. But again, it was their first game. Nobody knew what they would see from their offense. Now you have defensive coordinators that have some film. Let's see how they adjust. Let's see how they adapt to the Colorado offense, and we'll go from there.
And then you touched on it, man, that Duke-Clemson game. This is more of a Clemson story than it is a Duke one, but Miami is going to be playing both of these teams. That Clemson roster, man, it's not like you're going into a very tough environment there at Duke on a Monday night, right? So there seems to be trouble in paradise over there for Dabo.
Well, luckily we don't have to play Duke this year. It's changed.
Oh, that's right. I don't know why.
It's funny to say we don't have to see Duke, but again, okay, so we laugh about Duke from the years that Duke used to be Duke. But if you look at what Duke was last year, they were a tough-nosed team. They were well coached, and they have a very good quarterback, right? So coming into this game, I asked some people, I was like, what's the spread? And they're like 12.5 or 13. I said, really? They're like, yeah. And I go, look, I ain't the biggest betting man, but if I had a ton of money, I would have betted on Duke to cover. I didn't think maybe Duke would win, but I would put them on it to cover because, you look at what Duke was able to do. They were a 9-win ball club last year. And then coach went into the transfer portal and got some nice pieces to go with it. I just didn't think they would run away from them the way that they played last year. Now, Duke does have a very tough schedule. I mean, I think they got to play Notre Dame. They got to play Florida State. They got to play Wake Forest on their side. They got a tough schedule, but I think this just propels those kids to believe in their coach and what they're doing, to say, yeah, everybody laughing us. We're a basketball school, but we're not. What we did of the offseason can work, and we're not a fluke or 9-win fluke team last year. So I wasn't as surprised in the sense of Duke staying in the game. I was a little bit more surprised because you don't see Clemson being that undisciplined team as far as the fumbles that they had and the dumb penalties that they had. But Duke also had some stuff, right? Duke had some fumbles and a muff punt where I think that's where they got their 7 points. Mm-hmm. So that's football for you. But I think with Clemson and Dabo, you saw it last year at the end. They just weren't the team they were, in the past when you had a Trevor Lawrence or a Deshaun Watson, first round talent quarterbacks. And this kid was a 5-star kid coming out. And we saw with, DJ Uiagalelei the years before that he had a 4-game window that first year or 3-game window where he lit it up. He was the man. Everyone was like, damn, that's why he was a 5-star. Then when he became a starter, things changed, whether it was the defensive coordinators looking at those films and made him go towards his weakness, or he couldn't handle the pressure at the time, or there was some stuff in the coaching where they didn't get along. But it's always like you get a small sample size, somebody you're like, oh my God, he's going to be the next best thing. But then when it's like the pressure's on, you don't know what kind of player they are. That's a lot on his shoulder being at Clemson. You're carrying this next wave of what they've been doing for the last 10 years. So we'll see how they adjust and adapt. But the things that you don't see from this Clemson team you've seen in the past, who's their go-to receiver? You normally have like a big-time go-to receiver. Who's their defensive, like huge defensive lineman that's going to be that first-round pick. Like I know Tyler Davis, I think is the D tackle up there that played in Paca. That's really nice. But I mean, you had the Brian Brisset kid the last couple of years and the Christian Wilkins down here where you had that dominant defensive line to get after the quarterback. I think they're really dependent on those 2 linebackers that they have this year and the secondary help. But if you can't get after the quarterback, snap in and snap out, how dominant can you really be like you had in the past?
Well, that's the thing. And again, talking to scouts, they don't have that depth behind the studs. Listen, it was Georgia, like it was Bama, like the last 6-7 years over there. They were just rolling them up after, one after another there. So, listen, it's going to be a very interesting year in the ACC. That's
it really is.
Sure.
Because I mean, if you look at it right now, since there's no more divisions, you would have to say probably, Florida State, North Carolina take the cream of the crop as like the top 2 after the first week, beating SEC teams, one beating a ranked team in the top 10. Then you got to look at Duke to say, listen, we're going to have something to say this year in the ACC as well. Then I think it's kind of a cluster of teams that you really don't know. Like, do we know this Miami team is going to take that next step since they beat a Miami, Ohio, who I think is going to be a decent team, not like some cupcake team. Louisville, what are they going to do? Are they going to take kind of like that step since they did really well in the transfer portal and in their recruiting class? I just think it's going to be interesting, right? And then Wake Forest, you lose Sam Hartman, but you had a kid that played behind him and played well. And then, of course, Notre Dame doesn't count, but they play ACC teams, assholes.
Such a scam. Yeah. Such a scam.
I just don't get how you let them in during COVID because they needed a conference of playing, but you don't put any type of like thing to tie it to like, hey, by the way, if you do it here, you got to come play for us the next 5 years or something. Like it was just a cop out to me.
They rewrite the rules for Notre Dame. They always do.
I mean, listen, when you bring in that type of money with that type of school, I get it. It's all about money, except for when the kids do it, but it's all about money. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm eager to see what the rest of the year plays out for the ACC because I feel like there's 2 teams that said we're the best right now. We have the best quarterbacks in the conference. We have the most. Well, I wouldn't say North Carolina is the most talented, but I would say right now, looking at it, Florida State, top to bottom, is a very talented team, probably the most talented team in the ACC at the moment. But always like football, can they stay healthy? And then when people adapt to what they do, because they gave up a bunch of chunk yards on defense and they were undisciplined where they started doing a little chippy penalties and kind of yelling at each other. So let's just see how it goes for the rest of the year. You got to go to Clemson, see how that plays out. And then, when you play Miami FSU, it's normally not blowouts. We've had probably 2 or 3 in the last 10 or 12 years. Last year, having one, and then we beating them 52-10 at home. So it'll be interesting.
Listen, that Uiagalelei rolled off the tongue real easy for you, man.
Well, what's so funny is working radio, I had to talk about him, right? And I remember saying in a pregame show, and all the dudes looked at me like, I was like, bro, I'll be practicing, man. I go on YouTube, I listen to other people say stuff. Like I heard it's not Maui Goa. I think the G's silent, so I gotta change that now too. But yeah,
You just put me on game too, because I did not know that. Well, we gotta hit up Cam Gorby. He better have it in the media guide.
It should, and I should look at it. But I heard, commenters. I went back and watched the film on the game, and they were saying the names Maui Noa without the G, and then one of the guys like, "Oh, you don't say the G." I was like, "Well, damn, I sound like an idiot in the pregame show now too."
Well, listen, you're a pro's pro. You can catch this guy on the pregame show every week on 560 WQAM. Brian Monroe, really appreciate your time. We finally got the punter analysis, man. We've been waiting for it. So
I don't know if it was a good one, but it was there.
I'm just gonna clip it every time someone asks me about it. I'm just gonna send that reply. So appreciate the time again, man.
No problem, man. Take it easy.